Rabbi Meza, welcome back to the Line of Fire.
Hello, Dr. Brown. It's very nice to be with you again.
Well, thanks, sir. Hey, if we could just take a minute, if you could share your background, the very short version of the story. Is it true that you were originally a Baptist preacher?
Yes, I was. I attended Jacksonville Baptist Theological Seminary. And about 18 years ago, I converted to Judaism. And that's the mission of my organization. I mean, I run a website, as you know, called bejewish.org. And it's a parent organization toward Judaism International that encourages everyone to consider becoming fully Jewish.
Okay, so you're not encouraging Gentiles to live by the so-called 7 laws of Noah. You are doing the same as I'm doing, going into all the world and encouraging everyone to become full-fledged followers of Jesus. Mm-hmm. You are encouraging Gentiles to become completely Jewish, to convert to Judaism.
To convert through a formal conversion. Now, according to Jewish law, every Gentile is already a ben or a bat Noach, a son or a daughter of Noach. There's nothing really for them to accept. The big debate in the Jewish world is if Christians fall under that rubric, being that Christians consider, or many Christians consider Yeshua God himself. So some, mainly build off the opinions of the Rambam, teach that that in itself is a form of idolatry. I have a different opinion on that. I mean, I think that a Gentile believer in Yeshua does keep the 7 laws. I mean, I don't believe they fall under the rubric of heretics or idolaters. I think I sent you a video detailing that a few days ago. But no, I don't encourage them to keep the 7 laws because that's what they're bound to already. And really, I teach that the Noahide movement belongs in the Bronze Age.
All right, so... Yeah, go ahead. So, well, tell you what, hold on to that thought for a moment. Just your own background. So you were not raised in a Jewish home. You were raised in a Christian home, and right. you went to Jackson Theological Seminary, right?
My father's a Catholic and my mother's a Protestant, and I grew up in the church, in the Baptist church in South Florida. And I went off the path for a little bit, but I came back when I was around 17, and I hopped right into it like I do with most things in my life, and I went to seminary and I learned as much as I could, but there was just something didn't sit right with me. The whole notion that someone needs to accept the Messiah to be saved, and specifically Yeshua to be saved, that I posed this question to many of my teachers, and I typically got the same response, that if you're doubting Yeshua or scriptures that supposedly justify Yeshua, that's the devil and he's a liar and you shouldn't listen to him, right? And I did further investigation. Now, mind you, this is 18 years ago. This is before Tovia Singer. This is before all the notable counter-missionaries today. And I came
actually, I mean, Tovia had his material out years before that in cassette tape form. And when I debated him years back, of course, he's refused to debate me ever since. But when I debated him years back, he was a known entity. But basically, we didn't have internet, and things were not maybe as readily accessible. So you're saying you had to go on a bit of your own journey a little bit.
Right. I don't really subscribe to the ideology of the Jews for Judaism, Tovia Singer type rabbis.
Okay.
And I heard this message with the last rabbi you spoke, this notion that we don't care about educating Gentiles, that we don't care about anyone who's not ethnically Jewish. I don't think that's the message in Torah. I think that's antithetical to Torah. I think, like the Almighty tells us in Parshat Re'eh, he's encouraging Israel to choose life, to choose Torah. In other words, not to remain what they were, rabbinically speaking. They would have been equivalent to Noahides, I guess, with one additional law to circumcise themselves. But he's telling them choose life. In other words, by not choosing life, you'd be remaining in death. So I think that nowadays, with the offshoot that we have, which is evangelical Christianity and Islam, it's kind of hard to take an individual who is already ethically elevated to that level and in some way offer just 7 plain laws as an alternative to the rich religion he's leaving.
All right.
And I think the only alternative to that religion is Judaism, Torah Judaism.
Right. Understood. And again, we can have that discussion. But just in the 2 minutes we have before the break here, so you went through a formal conversion to Judaism.
Yes, sir.
All right. And what kind of a conversion was it? Was it an Orthodox conversion?
It was an Orthodox conversion in North Miami Beach, Florida.
Okay. And then since then, your rabbinic studies, how did you come to have the title rabbi?
I moved to Israel, and I learned in a few yeshivot, mainly Eshet Torah in the Old City, and Or Sameach and Malot Daphna, and I worked in outreach. Most people don't know that there's programs like Birthright and many programs that are geared to bringing Jews who are unaffiliated to be a little more conscious of their Jewish existence. So there's a lot of outreach programs in Jerusalem that target these individuals to try to bring them to Torah classes, put them in yeshivas, and this and that. So that's what I did when I was in Israel. And through my studying, I received smicha. I actually have a couple, and I did that for a few years. I lived in Israel for about 5 years. And then I moved back to South Florida, and I started doing the same thing here. However, I started doing it with a twist. Apart from just encouraging non-Jews to return to Judaism, I asked a few rabbis the question, what's wrong with encouraging people who are not born Jewish to become Jewish? And virtually every response that I received, every halachic response, was like, there's actually nothing wrong with doing that. And it makes you think, if there's nothing wrong with doing that, why haven't Jews been so eager to convert their neighbors, to make enemies into friends? And that really laid the foundation for my attack on Kabbalistic Judaism. I believe it's Kabbalistic Judaism that made Jews so ethnocentric. And like Chabad, like the first parak of the Tanya teaches, that the souls of the non-Jews are in some way irredeemable, and the soul of the Jew is elevated and actually part of Hashem. So I subscribe to a more rational type of...
I tell you what, sorry to cut you off there in mid-sentence. Let me just jump in. Friends listening, I'm going to translate some of that for you because Rabbi Meza is speaking with me, understanding I know the literature and the terms, but I want to translate some of this for you. So obviously I look at Rabbi Meza as someone who needs to return and embrace Jesus as the Messiah. He looks at me as someone misguided in other ways. We're going to continue this discussion. Stay right here. Joining us on the Line of Fire today, it's Thoroughly Jewish Thursday. Michael Brown here, speaking with Rabbi Asher Meza. So he was raised in a home, Catholic Protestant home, was in a Baptist church, went to seminary, ended up turning away from Jesus as Savior, Lord, Messiah, converting to Judaism, an Orthodox conversion to Judaism, and then getting ordained as a rabbi in Orthodox circles where he studied in Israel. And now he feels his mission is to convert people to Judaism. In other words, just as you and I, as followers of Jesus, want to spread the word and call everyone to turn to God and receive forgiveness and new life through Jesus the Messiah, he feels the burden to reach out to the whole world and call people to become Jewish, to convert to Judaism, which, again, is absolutely not mainstream Jewish approach. And if you remember, Jesus in Matthew 23 rebukes some of the religious leaders and says that you'll travel across, sea and dry land to make one proselyte, right? Sorry. And he's going to be worse than you when you're done. So it speaks of a zeal to win Jews to Judaism back then, but something not found today. So Rabbi Meza, you were saying in some of the mystical Jewish
just to
literature,
add, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, Dr. Rabbi. Well, just to add to what you just said, I would like to add that just like I did it, anyone could convert to Judaism and be fully accepted in the Jewish. Although Judaism does not actively proselytize today, they do accept converts, believe that Abraham was a convert. And even those, there are many Messianic believers who believe, like Jesus taught, that he didn't come to abolish but to fulfill, right? That they should also be keeping the law, and that's, at least biblically, you subscribe to a lot of the rabbinic literature out there, at least biblically, that's what it means to be a Jew, to enter into that Torah covenant to keep those laws. So,
and right, with the New Testament, what the New Testament makes clear, though, is for a Gentile that they don't have to be circumcised or come under the law of Moses. But that's, again, another discussion we get into. But just to be clear on this, you feel that it's later mystical Jewish literature that is more ethnocentric, that discourages Jews from proselytizing. What about Talmudic references that seem to say that a Gentile being a righteous Gentile is just as acceptable as the Jewish high priest, and other passages that seem to speak of Gentiles in denigrating terms as not on the same spiritual plane as Jews?
Well, there's actually three. There's a third category that you missed there, and I'll just break them all down now. Okay, so there's portions in the Talmud that do speak of the notion of a righteous Gentile, but it's an ambiguous notion. In other words, some rabbis say that a righteous Gentile, right, those known as Chesidei Olam, do have a share in the world to come, and there are some that say they don't. And these references that speak badly about Gentiles, it's typically virtually always with speaking about idolaters, not just your average Gentile, and for sure not your righteous Gentile, which I argue that even Messianics fall into the rubric of righteous Gentiles. Islam, I take a different approach with that, just because I believe that it's a completely different religion. But I'm of the belief that only because someone happens to believe that this certain individual or that certain individual is the Messiah, that I believe that shouldn't exclude you, because what unites us is Torah. I mean, as long as you keep Torah should have the written law, and Torah should pay the oral law. That's what unites us as Jews. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily here trying to convert you. I mean, you're already Jewish, or your listeners to Judaism, because I feel that they're going to be condemned if they don't convert. No, I think that it's just a great idea, and I think that remaining a Messianic or remaining a Christian ultimately hinders your growth theologically and academically.
All right, well, stay right there. We got a longer segment coming up. Speaking with Rabbi Asher Meza. So, Rabbi Meza, of course, you understand that I fully believe that God has fully revealed himself through the Messiah, Jesus, and that when we go away from him, then we will only go backwards, that we will go backwards spiritually, we'll go backwards theologically, we'll go backwards in terms of truth, and that God's full revelation, as predicted in Hebrew Scriptures.
I mean, that's a statement of faith you're making.
Well, it's a statement of fact in terms of my own life and everyone that I know for 45 plus years. It's a statement of fact to me. But I say I believe, I'm just stating it. I also believe I'm sitting here in a chair. It's a statement of fact as well.
They go forward academically. And as you know, I mean, till today, there's not a Messianic yeshiva that compares to rabbinic yeshiva. Why is that? And I'll tell you why it is. It's because Messianic yeshivas have to begin every shiur or every class starting with Yeshua and ending with Yeshua. And this hinders your growth ultimately.
Oh, no. The first thing is, where does God ever equate spirituality with academic growth alone or intellectualism alone? That would be saying that someone who isn't a brilliant student can't be intimate with God, which, of course, I doubt you believe that. But in point of fact, the yeshivot are endlessly discussing impractical things and traditions handed down by man, as opposed to plumbing the depths of spirituality. And I could just point to the houses of prayer around the world that are 24 hours of people just seeking God and worshiping him. And
it's a new phenomenon. We didn't see this in Scripture. I mean, even prayer. Prayer back then was facing Jerusalem and just meditating. I mean, apart from the introduction of Shachris and Mincha and Maariv, in other words, this notion of spirituality and uber spirituality is why I equate Messianic Judaism with Kabbalistic Judaism. I mean, it's become too heavenly good that it's not really earthly good. But I mean, the point stands.
But who are the ones around the world on the front? Who are the ones on the front lines, though, feeding the poor and building hospitals and building schools? It's always Christian organizations. They always lead the way in this.
Well, that's a new phenomenon that started in this country, by the way. I mean, in Europe, Christians.
Well, it's not the university. Okay, so talking academically, Oxford, Cambridge, these are all the universities were started by Christians.
Absolutely.
This is in America.
But they were Christians who had Hebrew, but a Hebrew notion to their theology, and it's something that didn't exist in Europe. In other words, it's that biblical foundation, that what Christians call Old Testament biblical biblical foundation that made them ethical. Christians really weren't ethical in Europe. I mean, you look how Christians behaved, and even today, even Copts in the Arab world.
Wait. So hang on. If we go back to the beginning, before Europe, the believers were universally known for their ethics. They were known for their sacrificial living. They were known for forgiving their enemies. They were known for caring for the poor. They were known, and so much of healthcare comes out of Christian tradition, and education comes out of Christian tradition. And you can go back to the earliest centuries for this.
The vast majority of those believers you wouldn't consider believers today. I mean, they had very different theological backgrounds. As a matter of fact, I think that this big explosion that we're seeing today with people converting to Judaism is a result of this Hebrew roots Messianic movement. In other words, it's actually helped bring people more to authentic Torah than the other way around. In other words, the Messianic movement has actually made more authentic Jews, real Torah Jews. I mean, real Torah Jews philosophically. In other words, I have no problem accepting a Messianic Jew who keeps, like I said, Torah fully as a brother in Torah. However, a theologically sound Torah Jew, the Messianic movement, has catapulted this movement because you have people who've never studied rabbinic literature before studying it, mind you, like through the prism of a Messianic teacher, but they're realizing, you know what, we've been led astray. We have been hindered academically, and this is why these seminaries, what they call Messianic yeshivot, do not compare. I mean, we do not even make it to the first step of an authentic yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, in Muncie.
Right, but if you go to the all right, but first I would reject a lot of what's studied there and a lot of where the emphasis is put there as off track and contrary to God's command, and certainly not reaching out to the rest of the world as a light. And I take you to the finest Christian seminaries. A lot of it's just numbers, the Messianic movement being smaller and many Messianic Jews being part of churches and things like that. But as far as academically, I mean, Christian academics have shined, and there's no shortage of brilliant Christian thinkers.
How is it contrary to God's commands?
Excuse me?
You just said it's contrary to God's commands.
Yeah, well, to be, if you're saying, and I agree, that there's a Jewish calling to be a light to the nations, then to be sitting, learning.
Right, in Proverbs it says that the Torah is the light and the mitzvot are the candle.
Right. So you got to take it out and shine it. If you're sitting in a yeshiva studying 16 hours a day, rabbinic tradition, you're not doing that. That's one thing. The second thing is a lot of what's being studied there is adding to the Torah.
That's studying. I mean,
a lot of what's being studied,
like an actual yeshiva.
Right. A lot of what's being studied.
To equip young men with
a lot of what's right. And what do the young men do? They do not go out into all the world. But so that's what I'm saying by contrary to command. And a lot of it is. All right, but as far as look, if numbers are the test, then you should be terribly discouraged because every day more people around the world, Muslims and atheists and Hindus and Buddhists and Jews, are discovering Jesus as the Messiah and being wonderfully born again and transformed in one day more than you'll see in 50 years.
And you would also have to agree that the only thing that really makes the New Testament ethical is the Torah itself. I mean, you wouldn't say that Yeshua said anything new. I mean, he just amplified Torah, just like the prophets did in Tanakh.
But I'm not rejecting Torah.
That's bringing people to a new, better life, not the notion of someone dying for their sins and coming back to life.
That is what transforms them because it's a new birth. It's a supernatural new birth. So it's not just academic study. I don't know if you ever.
To be proven. We know that Christians behave well because they follow a Jew who kept Torah. Right? But the notion of actually having to believe in him dying and coming back again, I don't think that makes them any more ethical. I mean,
certainly it does.
That makes them ethical.
I'm an eyewitness to it. Certainly it does because they get a new heart. I know people that were miserable people, that were murderous people, that were treacherous people, that were filthy people, and God gave them a new heart, and that transformed
I would say that they would all come to Torah if they were offered Torah instead of Christianity or Islam in prison, wherever they accepted their new religion. In other words, it's because Jews are not out there. Selling this product.
No, of course not.
Sells itself.
Of course not. Number one, offering them live by these laws is something that they're unable to do. They need a new heart. And Jesus appearing to a Hindu saying, "Who's the real true God?" or appearing to someone involved in terrorist activity, or appearing to a radical Muslim, and these are all people I know personally. All people I know. Hang on. These are all people I know personally. That's what changed them, not giving them a set of laws, and then God wrote his laws on their heart.
Wait, hold
on. I'm an eyewitness to the power of gospel
transformation.
transformation.
within these laws, it tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love the stranger. I mean, it says, "Thou shalt be," it says, "Be holy as I am holy." When you say law, like it's some sort of article in some law book. No, these are ethics. This is the foundation of ethics, and this is what made Yeshua who he became in the New Testament. In other words, an ethical individual who made the world ethical, or the Christian world ethical, because he kept Torah. So all I'm saying is, hey, you know what? Cut out the middle guy and go straight to Torah, and you'll be less hindered, because I think that eventually, although Christians are ethical nowadays, or at least for the last 200 years in the country, I think that their philosophy will eventually catch up with them. In other words,
actually, the rest of the New Testament is filled with high and lofty ethics. That's the first thing. The second thing, the one you disparagingly referred to as
do you agree?
Excuse me?
So that those ethics are built off the Torah? Is there anything ethical that doesn't stem from Torah already?
There's a deeper calling that goes beyond Torah in terms of the calling to love our enemies and the sacrificial love that can only be emulated because of what Messiah did. In other words, he takes everything to its highest possible height and builds and goes even further. After all, he's the Messiah. We would expect him to do that. The example of love one another as I have loved you, you cannot get from Torah alone. We've got a break coming up, and then we'll get back to you on the other side of the break. But just to speak clearly here, number one, the calling love one another as I have loved you, that only comes through his self-sacrificing love. It cannot come through Torah alone. There's nothing you will get in Torah that gets you to love one another as I have loved you, because no one else laid down their lives for us the way he did. No one else like him laid down his life for us, like us. When you say get rid of the middleman, this is what I hear you saying. You're up there in a plane, and there's somebody in a 1,000-foot pit, and you're telling them, hey, I've got some great laws here. No. You need someone to reach down into that pit. Look, I was raised in a Jewish home. Now, I was not traditional, but trust me, I had enough encounters with traditional Judaism over the years. That's not what saved me. That's not what's transformed me. That's not what convicted me of my sin and brought me to God. The one that you referred to as the guy in the middle guy, is the Savior of the world. And without him reaching out to us, we're lost forever. Right, back to you, sir, when we come back. Thanks for joining us, friends, on the line of fire, 866-34-TRUTH. It's Thoroughly Jewish Thursday. All right, I've got a few more minutes with Rabbi Asher Meza. So, Rabbi Meza, why disparage the fact that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of people were walking in darkness, that were idol worshipers, that had no interest in God, didn't read the scriptures? They now worship the God of Israel and love the whole Bible because of Jesus the Messiah. If your interest is connecting people to the God of Israel, why not rejoice in that? Why try to pull people away from Jesus?
My job is to bring people from a lower state of holiness to a higher state of holiness. And you were talking about this idea that permeates the Christian world, that in some way the God of the Old Testament is an angry, legalistic God, and love and grace came only to the New Testament. And I mean, I think anyone who would make such a statement does not know Tanakh.
But I didn't make that statement. You made it. I didn't make it. I don't think that. I've written whole books against that concept.
You made this statement, but that that the notions that are vital to a Christian to believe, that are vital to Christians to make them ethical, are these notions that are outside of Torah that exist solely in the New Testament. That's why you need a New Testament, because if not, why do you need a New Testament if everything ethical there could be found in what Christians call the Old Testament? When we see Moses laying down his life, also Samson laying down his life, every prophet laying down their life for a love of Israel, for a love of God. I mean, how many times does Yeshua quote the book of Psalms? In other words,
right. So hang on. Tell me anyone as perfect as...
the Torah is not enough. You're saying that Tanakh's not enough.
No, you're saying it's not enough. You're the one with oral law. You stated that right from the start. Without oral law, which is endless, as you know, you're saying that what God gave in writing is not enough. I'm saying what God gave in writing is he fulfilled. He said he was going to do certain things, and he did them, and the New Testament records that.
Every Yeshiva student will tell you that every bit of oral law is clearly considered derabanan by the rabbis. The rabbis do not make a distinction. They don't make the mistake of following in the prohibition of adding to the Torah by calling their words Torah.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
No, they don't.
What do you pray? When you light the Sabbath candles, what do you pray?
Right. Yes, we say Asher Kedei Shana B'Mitzotav. Well, first of all,
Right. When did God
that
command you to, in the Torah, in the written Torah, when did God command you to light Sabbath candles?
No. God commanded us in Deuteronomy chapter 17 to heed the judges of those days. In other words, the men of the Sanhedrin. And it tells
to
us,
heed the Levitical
famous,
priests in legal disputes. To heed
Right.
the Levitical priests in legal disputes. That's all he said. It has nothing to
says that
do
when
with
they
someone
command
commanding
you
you.
will be Torah,
It has
says,
nothing to do with
do
God
not stray from
commanding.
the right or to the left from what they instruct you. And it says
The
that by
Levitical
them,
priests who function as Israel's Supreme Court in legal debates. Okay.
As you know, that throughout Jewish history, the Sanhedrin sat on top of the Temple Mount, even in the time of Yeshua. So what was this court doing there? This court was building takanot, gezerot, fences around the Torah. So we know that by obeying them is equivalent to obeying God himself.
Exactly. So everything in the oral law is adding to the law. In other words, whatever they say.
Not if they call it rabbinic. The rabbis call it rabbinic.
Is it rabbinic to light the Sabbath candles?
I mean,
is that D'Rabbanan or is that D'Oraita?
You know, because I think you really should know that lighting candles is not even rabbinic, it's a minhag. Now, the question you should ask me is it rabbinic to light Hanukkah candles, which actually doesn't.
No, I'm asking you Sabbath candles because it says, because the blessing you pray is that God commanded. Where did God command you?
That blessing's not in the Mishnah.
Where did God command?
Sir,
this is a simple question.
Right.
Where in the written Torah did God command?
Hold on. That's not a rabbinic blessing. Okay.
All right. Listen. I'm really doing my best to be polite, okay? And I'm trying to ask you something. So I'm just giving you a second to hear me, all right? Because it's just very unproductive for listeners if we're both talking at the same time. It's a really simple question. Where in the written Torah did God command us to light Sabbath candles? And if it's not a divine command, why are we calling it that? That is adding to the Torah. So that's my simple question. Where in the Torah did he command you to light Sabbath candles?
Again, in Deuteronomy chapter 17, it commands you to heed the instructions of the judges.
In legal disputes, heed the Levitical priests in a legal dispute. This is not a legal dispute. Read Deuteronomy 17. We could read it 1,000 times. It has nothing to do with lighting Sabbath candles.
The
Zero.
sages instructed us to light Sabbath candles under the notion of Oneg Shabbat. In the Sefer Yeshayahu, it says that you should rejoice in the Sabbath. Now, there was this idea floating around among the Sadducees and even among the Karaites that one should sit in darkness on the Sabbath. So the sages instructed that one should light a lamp. There is no blessing in the Talmud. There's no blessing in the Mishnah. It's a minhag that created this blessing.
All right, so it's adding to the Torah. Just admit it. It's adding to the Torah and calling it a divine commandment.
If you ask any yeshiva student, he'll tell you that it's a rabbinic command. It's not a Torah command. I'm very familiar with this notion. No,
it's one of the 7 rabbinic commands that's considered to be on the same level. I mean, it's sometimes included in the list of 613
I'm not sure where you're
commandments.
Reading your Judaism from. I mean, I would like to show. I mean, please show me where is it in the Talmud, where is it in the Mishnah, that you know that these are the sources of Mishnaic literature. Right now, Hanukkah candles, yes. We also say
Okay, fine.
Right, for Hanukkah candles.
Fine.
Because we have a commandment of lo ta'asur, the commandment to not stray from the rulings of the sages.
But that's not what it's talking about. It is not here. Look at the text. If any case arises requiring decision between one kind of homicide and another, one kind of legal right and another, one kind of assault and another, any case within your town is too difficult for you, then you shall arise, go to the place that the Lord your God will choose, and there you have the Levitical priests who will judge. It's a Supreme Court. But here's the bottom line. What you basically said is anything the rabbis tell you has divine authority because Deuteronomy 17 says follow them. And that's why God often had to, it's not talking about a Sanhedrin, Levitical priests that were installed there. But here's the bottom line, sir.
The Nasi went out additionally with the Levitical priests. And as you know, the Sanhedrin stood on the... So
here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. Where did they get
their authority from? If not Deuteronomy chapter 17.
Here's the bottom line, which is real simple.
Often
throughout our history, the governmental leaders misled us. Often throughout our history, they went in the wrong direction, and God raised up prophets. It was not a matter of follow the majority. It was a matter of follow God speaking through his prophets. And somehow, whatever it is, a hyper-intellectualism or an emphasis on academic study and thinking that equates with holiness, You've gotten away from the spirit of the matter. You've gotten away. I don't know if you were ever truly born again or not, only God knows, but you've gotten away from the spirit of the matter. You've gotten away from that which really matters, which is knowing God and being intimate with him and walking in that forgiveness that comes through Yeshua. And yes, he goes beyond what Moses or Samson or anyone did by being the perfect one who laid down his life for us as filthy sinners. So, hey, listen, the door's still open for you to come home, sir, and we'll keep it open for you, praying for you. And maybe
the Torah was the same yesterday, and it's still the same today, and it'll be the same tomorrow. And Deuteronomy 18 says that he doesn't raise up a prophet because our leaders have led us astray, but it says because we begin to emulate the practices of the nations that we depose.
Right, and he raised up a prophet like Moses, and Deuteronomy 34 says no prophet like that was raised up. Where is he? Read Acts chapter 3. It'll set the record straight. Hey, we're out of time. Thanks for calling.